For Mozart's Fantasy Number 3 in D minor, the piece is very operatic, and it's very, very interesting this way because there's lots of different moods happening in the piece, and just one short piece actually. And it reminds me very much of an operatic aria that you would hear. So I would definitely recommend for my student to, first off, I think this would be a really good learning opportunity to listen to some of Mozart's operas and have my student listen to an opera and then start this piece after that and see how they can relate this to some of the arias that they heard in that piece. I would listen to a recording of this with my student or play it myself, and ask them to listen and watch for the emotions that happen in this piece and to list out some of the emotions that they felt in this piece. Some of the things that I would try to lead my student into listening for is the darkness of that opening section, and lead them to see how this is the orchestra's introduction to the soloist. Say to them, it almost seems hopeful at the end here. I might have my student to cross hands to get this part. It's even almost slightly hopeful with that dominant. And then we go into, after the orchestra has just had their introduction, we go into the soloist. And it's very obvious. See this obvious solo line. And I would take an opportunity to listen, talk about hand balance here, how we have this very obvious vocal line, this lamenting sort of vocal solo for the soprano, and again relate this to a Mozart opera and how this sounds like this woman is lamenting in the middle of this sort of comedy. Maybe she lost somebody, maybe she's talking about someone she loves that doesn't love her back, but how the orchestra is the left hand and we need to keep that quiet. But even in the left hand, how there's balance, how we want that bass line to come out, and the middle voices to be very, very quiet. And Mozart shows us that by the half note versus the eighth notes in the left hand. And talking about this sighing gesture, there are quite a few opportunities to talk about the sigh gesture. Heavy, light, and lifting off of that gesture. We could talk about that, how to shape it, and what does it mean to sigh in music? How does that sound like? And how that ties well with this lament that we have going on. So we have this introduction, this dark introduction of the lament of the solo, and there's a conversation kind of going on with oneself here with that soloist. This definitely feels like there's more of a forward motion here. We're talking about forward motion and what makes a piece have forward motion and how to bring out the character of that, this anxiety that's felt here. talk about that, how you have that forward motion, and that continues to build throughout this whole part. And then it goes back to that same lament. So there's lots of emotions happening here. You have the lament, the anxiety, back to the lament, and then all of a sudden you have this presto section. That goes up and all of a sudden it seems very abrupt, you know, that this section came in here. Oh, that was it. And I might suggest my student to share this between the two hands, especially coming up to make that presto section work. So you have that big flare there, and then all of a sudden you come back to the lament. And I would talk about how this feels much more like this climax of just total grief. And this probably needs a heavier sound, and Mozart shows us that by adding in forte, but also the octaves. And he wants it to be heavier here. It comes back with that anxiety again, so they're feeling torn. It's very operatic, and then again you have the presto section and back to the lament. The last thing I would point out is at the very end, of course we change keys, and now all of a sudden it's changed to this kind of more optimistic. Maybe something's happened, something's changed, she's figured out that the person's not dead after all. You know, it's changed. It's a really happy dolce sweet moment, so she's happy and she's excited, and the piece continues, and all of a sudden you have this kind of coloratura part with the scale, and here it's very Mozart. You have the trill at the end. So it ends, and that would be the end of the coloratura part, and then the orchestra would come back in. And they come back in, just like an aria. So it's very vocal, very operatic, and this would be a very good piece to help show that to the student, how you can explain emotions through this operatic form, even if in fantasy it exemplifies the operatic form.